points out in his book on being certain, Michael Burton, on being certain. He's a cognitive neuroscientist and a brain surgeon. And he noticed that there were a lot of times when he was flooded with an emotional feeling of confidence in his rational conclusion, and he wondered where that came from, because he recognized that our brain is about an 8-pound piece of meat, a biological organ that works with chemical reactions and all that, and creates feelings. And so that feeling of confidence, he wondered where that came from, and then he wondered what was the correlation between the feeling of confidence and the actual outcome or the accuracy of the thing that he was feeling confident about. Now, there wasn't any. In fact, everything we know about expert opinions and judgment is that, well, that's why there's poker games. That's why there's professional poker players and other ones. When they know the amateur knows what the poker professional plays the odds and plays the stack accordingly, and can recognize irrational emotional behavior in others when they're playing improperly. So the feeling of confidence, he did some work on that and concluded that in the evolutionary era, when the brain was evolving like little monkeys, that we were never the biggest, fastest, strongest. We may have been the cleverest, very alert, but we had to be because there were so many things out there that were going to eat us. And so if you're a monkey in a tribe of monkeys and you're walking down a trail and there's some motion in the bushes, and now suddenly you know that's a tiger, and you feel that that's a tiger, and you instantly act. Well, if you're wrong and the other monkeys didn't trigger, and you just got startled by a noise, you jumped up in the tree and nothing happened, and the other monkeys laugh at you, you feel a moment of shame, and then you're lower on the social order because you flinched. And then on the 100th time that happens, though, there really is a tiger, and the other monkeys get eaten, but you're safe in the tree, and you get to reproduce. And so evolution has a little selection pressure for brains that are adapted to jumping sooner rather than later. And so this feeling of confidence about the intuition is something that the brain has evolved in order to trigger action immediately. And so as we started to develop rational faculties to stop and think things through, well, that's like standing in front of a train on the train tracks and trying to make a rational decision of which is the better way to go, left or right. And you could overthink that. And if you in the words of President Bush, misunderestimated how much time you had available, you might have made the optimal decision, which was go to the left, but get crushed because you waited too long. So sometimes just anything is better than nothing. So those feelings of confidence compensates for the fact that as we developed a rational brain that could start thinking about things abstractly and conceptually, we were taking more time to think before we acted, because guys who could think twice and act once had an evolutionary advantage over folks who just acted on impulse. Like when lions hunt you, they have visible lions, the young ones over here, and they make the herd charge, and so they just instinctively go the other way, where the real lion pride is waiting to kill you. So we were able to develop a brain that could say, he's here, there's lions over there, I'm going to go that way at 90 degrees chance to miss the ambush line. But if you sat around and thought about it too long, you would get killed because of indecision. So we have these competing modules in our brain. Irrational brain that wants to sit around and think and weigh all the evidence and imagine future states and anticipate risks and reward and look at consequences of action, that remembers pain and remembers joy and uses that to influence the decision with those emotions, and the emotions of the feelings of certainty. So as we start developing more and more professional judgment, the sliding scale of how confident we should be about our conclusions changes. And so every day it's a new day, and we've got to find ways to reconcile how much confidence should I have in the conclusion that I drew. And the best tool we've ever discovered as a way to account for or to compensate for those feelings in the emotional center is the scientific method, which looks deliberately at how we make claims and how we find data and how we answer questions and calibrate degrees of confidence that allow us to act in a way that is justified by the evidence and we have and the conclusions that we draw. So I say all that just to say that the biggest surprise then is a moment in which you had made a rapid practical estimate about what was likely to happen or what was going to happen next, and then you put the minimum mission essential attention on it and we're just kind of cruising along. Like when you're driving, how many red lights were there? Are you sure that you stopped at them? Are you really sure? All I know is that I didn't get a ticket. I'm still here, so I think I didn't go through any, but I couldn't tell you how many red lights there were. I'm trying to remember exactly what route I even took, because I try to take a different one each day so that I can be mindful on the way in as a reminder to be mindful. And I don't like to get templated because the enemy's always tracking us. Never go back to your base the same way that you left, so, because that's where they're going to wait for you to come back. So that biggest surprise then occurs because you made a practical estimate about what was going to happen, and then you were attending to other things, which is what our brain allows us to do, to differentiate on tasks, to concentrate on a couple things at the exclusion of others, so that we can bring our focused attention and cognitive skills and fine motor skills and the opposable thumbs and anticipate future states and have deferred gratification. That's where civilization comes from. But then something happens in the wider environment that triggers it. Whoa! So the little monitor, the little insurance policy, which is out there, the emotional rat brain, that is very risk averse. Oh, that was different, and it brings you back into the moment from whatever you were doing. So we had to have ways of doing that. So that's a third mental process that's swirling around in our head. You know, fight or flight, cognitive abstract thinking, time disassociated modeling and video review of potential future states, empathy that understands what it would feel like to do this or imagining that, or empathy with what others are doing. That's just the basis of social learning and collaboration and understanding and appreciation of the other. But there's another module that allows you to quickly get back to the survival mode or attend to this new thing, because that new piece of information just disproved the hypothesis that you had a good handle on what was going on, where it says, oh, something just changed, and that's how all big changes occur. They start with that stitch in time that saves time. So we are very attenuated and attuned to seeing those distinctions. And that's the way our visual cortex works, and the audio cortex, if that's the word, operates. So the biggest surprise when that happens, you should notice as much of the data as you can. What was going on? What was I seeing, hearing, feeling, smelling, touching, sensing? What was it like? So that we can find out what the trigger was. And then that trigger is an impulse to act. It made you snap back into mindfulness. So that's how you find what your triggers are. So you can maybe create an environment in which you minimize those triggers if you don't want to be distracted, if you can safely avoid those triggers. So creating a favorable environmental condition can add to your performance. Or you want to make sure that you have early alert systems that are really attuned to the way that you process that kind of surprise information, so that you have an alarm clock that is guaranteed to wake you up because that noise is going to be the thing that does it, or maybe it's the light or whatever it may be. So knowing what your triggers are, and then you can follow that back to the assumption that was proven wrong, or the one that didn't follow through, to see what was it about my ability to estimate that was going wrong. Was I making a good estimate and this was just a low probability event, or this was just a thing that could happen and then my alert system worked, or was it some assumption that I made about the world that proved to be not correct or needed to be fine-tuned? Because things are never just correct or incorrect. There's gradations of validity. So every surprise moment, every aha moment, every moment of Zen is an opportunity to walk that trail from your highest level of conscious thought all the way down to that internal wiring and your emergency alert monitoring system, and to learn something about how your brain's wired, which now matters when you're trading, and especially the shorter the time frame that you are in, that to be able to rapidly estimate what's going on and update your assessment, sort of like a Bayesian statistics where you continually update your estimate of what's going on as new information comes to light. Or you start noticing those things that trigger you. What you're really doing is introspective learning about your own processing equipment, which will make you a better trader. It'll help you do the engineering on your decision making so that you decide what information you need to make the decisions you're going to make based on certain confidence levels, and then you decide how much risk is appropriate, minimum and maximum. There's a minimum amount of risk that you must take, otherwise you're wasting your time and you should be doing something else. Sort of the time value of money and the money value of your time. But then there's some kind of maximum risk that you should take that, as indicated by analysis of the data set of previous cases, so that you don't exceed what is justified by the statistical treatment of your performance. Which is why we want to be in a statistical processing mode all the time about how we manufacture and produce R. We want to have reliable systems that are routinized, so we can do routine things routinely, so that we can know when we're on or off track, and we can monitor our performance right away. So that if I'm off performance, I can find the causal factor right away, and I can estimate how good I'm doing while I'm doing it, and know how much risk I can add or subtract as a function of how I'm doing so far. Do I have a hot hand? Is there such a thing as a hot hand? Do I have streaks, or is that just market conditions are really favorable and a lot of stuff is working? Well, I should know that relationship between my rule sets and my performance and the market conditions, and know how that influences my decisions to take the next trade and at what level. So when we think about the 5 feedbacks, those are the things that we're looking for. Whether you're listening to me talk, or listening to a video, or watching a case study, or doing a prototype test of your own, or working with somebody else, an accountability partner, and you're studying what they're doing, and you're going to give them feedback on what you see, or you're doing that as part of the after-action review, where you assess your own planning, preparation, execution, and even the assessment itself, and you're looking for things that, where of all the things that I planned, here was the best thing about planning that I did, so that I can sustain it, or the thing that needs work, or whatever it may be. And then this is a systematic, structured way to get the most of the learning out of every situation that you're in. Because all the things that you do are not just the things that you do, but they're also examples of you doing things that you can then study to get better by watching the game film. And the game film is your personal learning journal and your daily trading journal. The daily trading journal is your documentation, the data of what it was that you did and how you felt and what the screenshot looked like and the performance numbers. And then when you do the daily assessment, the insights that you get then move from the trading journal to the learning journal, which is then our systematic way of documenting those moments of insight. And then your learning plan, your to-do list, is some kind of prioritized list of things that you've decided to get better at, or to not be so bad at, to improve some things, in some kind of prioritized manner based on how fast can I get it done, what's it going to cost me to do it, what's the payoff, and then doing some kind of priority list that always has me on the next best thing that I can do for the good of the team overall. And that's a continuous update too, because as things come in and out of phase and you do things and learn other things, that's an adaptive list, which is part of our learning journal and our plan going forward. So professional judgment then is that commitment to a systematic, serious, disciplined approach to acquiring skills that can be taught and can be learned and can be applied, that will give you an edge against people who aren't willing to do the work or can't do the work or reject the fact that there's work to be done because they want to go by how they feel. Everybody's an adult and everybody is responsible for their own choices, and I respect them as people, and I wouldn't dream of telling them they're right or they're wrong. I just live in a world in which I'm trying to get better, and I'm surrounded by other people that make decisions. So at some point, people that are in the market, they either deliberately knew the risks or they're taking risks that they're going to learn from the consequences. So life is a journey of learning. So when we're developing professional judgment, these feelings of gratitude and forgiveness, the mechanism of the trading journal and learning journal is how we develop this professional judgment. The 5 feedbacks are the structured way that we get the most juice out of every squeeze.